Now, for those who missed our conversation with Trapper, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about the Tennessee Vintage Baseball and what it is and how it came about.
Absolutely. The Tennessee Association of Vintage Baseball plays baseball by the rules of 1864. So it's a Civil War era barehanded baseball. And when you come out to see one of our games, one of our events, it's really living history. We hope we're bringing that game from that period back to life. Oftentimes when we think about the Civil War, we think about the reenactments of battles. This is really, we're reenacting the battle of baseball for folks. So it's just an absolute great time. The league started a year ago with two teams in Nashville. Trapper was one of the original founders along with Michael Thurman. And they got together, wanted to play vintage baseball in Tennessee, and they were first going to start one team, but then they realized they needed two teams to play baseball.
There you go.
And so they did, and it just took off like wildfire and had great success. And then this year, the second year of the league, has expanded to 8 teams across the state, 2 in East Tennessee, 6 in Middle Tennessee, and we've just been having a great time playing vintage baseball through the summer.
Now, you are the operations manager and curator for the East Tennessee History Center at Knox County Public Library, and obviously have a deep interest in history. What kind of research had to be done to determine what kind of baseball they played and what kind of uniforms they wore, etc., back in the Civil War era?
Well, I'll tell you, that's been my guilty pleasure for this past year, is being able to delve into that history. I think that's what attracted me to the game, was that, you know, we like I mentioned earlier, when we think of the Civil War period, we're often focused on the politics, the war, all that. This gives us a whole new angle to interpret that period, and that's just been such a pleasure to dig through the newspapers, read about the early teams that were in the area. I think one of the jewels that we found early on for the Holstons, the team that I play on, was the fact that there was this brief little line that said the boys look good in their uniforms of blue and red. And, so that was just a nice little tidbit that we took up and ran with. So our uniforms are blue and red, and we try to be as historically accurate as possible.
Now, will the boys in blue and red be playing on Saturday?
Yes, 6 or 7 of the Holstons are headed up to the game at DeVault Field, so we're looking forward to that.
Who's your opponent?
Everybody. This is actually sort of an all-star game.
Okay.
So when folks come out and see the game, there'll be a mixture of all the uniforms from the teams throughout the state. So it'll be a great event to come out to and see all the teams there represented in their different attire.
Now, you mentioned bare hand baseball, no gloves. There are a lot of other differences that those of us who are used to modern baseball will go, whoa, that doesn't look quite like what I know. Tell us about a few of those.
Sure. There are some similarities. You're going to still recognize it as a game. There's 9 innings, 9 players, 90 feet between the bases. But the biggest difference that you're going to notice is what's called the on-the-bound rule. So if the striker hits the ball and it goes over and touches the ground and pops up and is fielded, the striker is out. So that helps saves our hands a little bit.
What about base runners that may be on base when that happens?
They can advance. They don't have to tag up. So that adds a little wrinkle to the game as well.
Indeed. I noticed one of the other things on your website, which, by the way, is Tennessee Vintage Baseball, all one word, TennesseeVintageBaseball.com, that there is no overrunning of first base.
Absolutely. That takes a little bit of getting used to. So when you're about 85 feet down through there, you better be pulling on the brakes.
Talk about the baseball itself and the difference between the baseball in the Civil War era and today's baseball.
Sure. So we're used to seeing the double figure-8 baseball. The baseball we play with is a little bit larger. It's called a lemon peel. We also call it an apple or onion. It's made out of a single piece of leather that's cross-stitched. So a little bit larger. People think it's probably softer because we play barehanded, but trust me, it's not. But we do play with the same ball throughout the game, and it does tend to loosen up a little bit as we play.
Now, you have mentioned onions and apples and strikers. There's a whole new terminology. Will folks have a glossary handed out to them, or will there be sort of an introduction to learn what people are talking about on the field?
Absolutely. Our plan is to have a few programs up that way, and then to be sure to stay around and be in the audience to answer questions about all those things.
Great.
That is part of the game, is learning some of the new terminology and some of the great phrases to root on the teams.
Does the pitcher pitch Now, what do you call the pitcher now?
The hurler.
The hurler. Does the hurler pitch overhanded or underhanded?
Underhanded. So the job of the pitcher or the hurler is to throw a hittable ball. There's no called balls or no called strikes in the 1864 game. So his job is to throw the ball in so that it can be hit. So it's a direct underhanded throw that's to be released below the belt.
What about, I'm just picking out various things here, what about a runner that tries to slide into a base? Is that done in
the
vintage?
rule book didn't specifically talk about that, but we are playing a very gentlemanly version of the game, so we're going to keep our uniforms looking good throughout the game.
Okay, no sliding.
No sliding.
What about umpires?
One arbiter for the entire field. His job was really to make sure that really call fair and foul balls, to watch over the game from one vantage point. He usually stands behind the dish. And so it's really up to the players sometimes to make the calls themselves. It's not uncommon in our league to see a player get on base and say, well done, sir, you bested me, tip their hat, shake their hand, and head back to the bench.
I love it. I love it.
But if for some reason they couldn't come to terms on a call, we actually can turn to the crowd and ask the crowd what they saw. And in that instance, it's a true home field advantage.
And therein lies probably a rhubarb in the stands, right?
Indeed.
In conversation with Justin Brown, your director of media, he wanted to give a real loud shout-out on the program this morning to the Bristol Pirates for hosting vintage baseball.
Absolutely. We've been working with Lucas Hobbs there, and they have just been remarkable hosts, and we're just looking forward to coming up there and playing this weekend.
And what's the admission charge, or is there a special admission charge for your game, or is this part of a package deal with a regular Pirates game?
It's part of a package. So if you have a ticket to the Pirates game, you can come out to our game for free. It's included in that ticket for your Pirates game. So the gates will open at 3:30. We will start playing at 4 o'clock, and we'll play for 2 hours, from 4 to 6. And then we'll give the field back over to the Pirates and the Blue Jays so that they can throw out their first pitch at 7 o'clock.
I would imagine, in addition to the adults that are going to be very entranced by everything on the field, the kids are going to be mesmerized. Do you go and talk to the kids afterwards?
Absolutely. That's been one of, I think, the most special moments that we've had this year, are the way the kids have taken to this game. We always promote it as a family-friendly event, and it really, truly is. I'm always so humbled when a kid comes over and asks us to sign a ball, and it makes you feel like you're really someone special and a bigger athlete than you are in your own mind.
Well, it's a way for them, I guess, to touch history, too.
Exactly. One
thing I note here, among the many rules that are different in vintage baseball from what we know contemporary, no infield fly rule. A player may intentionally drop a ball to begin a double play.
Yes.
I could see where that could start some perhaps hurled words back and forth from between the teams there as well. That's one that I think probably could create a lot of dust, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it's a unique wrinkle. As you play the game, you realize that the infield game is really the key to this game because of not having the gloves. It's amazing when you think a throw to first is going to make it there, and it just it's just different because you're trying to gauge the speed to make the play, and what you think is a sure out all of a sudden can end up being 2 to 3 runs.
With all these differences, we're thinking out loud, by the way, with Butterbean, with all the Knoxville Holstons, of all the differences in rules between vintage baseball and contemporary baseball, do players sometimes find themselves accidentally slipping into a wrong century, and will the arbiter call them out?
Absolutely. We have that discussion on the bench all the time. It's hard to erase what you know and go back and reset to that period. So that's one of the tricks of the game, is just trying to focus on the rule book and not bring to the table what you already know.
I'm curious, in doing your research on Civil War baseball, and in my reading about the Civil War, numerous times I've read where opposing soldiers, the blue versus the gray, in times when a battle was not going on, would actually converse with each other, actually swap tobacco, food items, and so forth. In your research, did you find any occasions where they played against each other in baseball?
I've heard those stories. I personally haven't ran across a particular account of that, but one of the items that came through one of the auction houses here in Tennessee last year was actually a Civil War era baseball.
Wow!
And the story behind that baseball went that it was held by one person in the company, and that when they set up camp, the ball would come out. They would play baseball. And then when they were ordered to march, it was that person's job to record where they were in the game, hold on to the ball until the next time they had the opportunity to play. So I really do think that that was such a popular diversion during the time and during the Civil War, and that's what helped spread the game across the country and become the country's game.
That obviously, too, is where the idea of keeping records began for
Absolutely.
baseball. And statisticians are probably enthralled with that individual ever since, too.
Right.
And I want to ask you one last thing here, Butterbean. Has there been a proliferation across the state of Tennessee of men wearing, for some reason, handlebar mustaches?
I think so. And we're doing our best to try to keep that trend alive. We've got a couple guys on our team that wear them, and I don't know if they enjoy it or not, but every time they have a good hit, I'll turn to the crowd and say, "That's mustache power right there."
There you go.
Causing that play.
Probably put Roddy Fingers to shame.
Yes,
too.
indeed.
We've been thinking out loud with Butterbean, Adam Butterbean Alfrey, who is the operations manager and curator of the East Tennessee History Center at Knox County Public Library, and a proud member of the Knoxville Holstons. Thanks so much for thinking out loud with us this morning here on Tri-Cities Talk Radio about vintage baseball, and hope to see you Saturday.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to our trip up there.
Strike her up.
Thank you, sir.
And again, that game's at 4 o'clock at DeVault Stadium in Bristol.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a ticket to the Bristol Pirates Blue Jays game this Saturday night, you can come early and enjoy vintage baseball starting at 4 o'clock with the gates opening at DeVault Stadium at 3:30.
And I'm sure you can buy tickets on site, too, at the stadium there
Sure.
for the game, for both games, actually. So going to be a lot of fun this weekend.